enjoyed reading Cheryl Teves's materials in The Successful Farming, and I'm sure you have. And she showed up one day when I was doing one evening when I was doing a series on building a budget in Polk County. And I thought, I know that name. And suddenly I thought, my goodness, you just never know who you're going to meet. And it was really kind of fun to have her. And so she got to hear me, so today I get to hear her. But Cheryl has been, I think, a real addition to the image of farm women because she's put us right up where we belong as part of the business operation. I don't know, I have used as reference material many of the things she's written on Farm Women in Credit and some of the other surveys that she's done. And today she's going to be talking to us about how the role of farm women has changed over the years. And for many of us, we don't stop and think about where we are today. You know, we know what Grandma did and we know what Mother did, and we're so busy doing what we do, we don't have a chance to stop and see where we belong. So Cheryl is going to talk to us about the changing role of farm women. Cheryl?
Thank you very much. It's good to be here with you this morning at the Women in Farm Business Program here in Ames. Well, Ellen, I hate to tell you how far I got in that budget process, but it was a good attempt, and perhaps I'll try it again sometime. It's good to see so many of you here today, despite the somewhat icy conditions that are on some of the roads around the area. I spoke down in Fairfield, Iowa, on Saturday evening at a banquet there, and I know that they had a few less people than they had planned on having because of the road conditions in the area. As some of you may know, I did spend 3.5 years as associate editor of Farm Wife News magazine in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, before coming to Successful Farming about 2.5 years ago. First of all, I'd just like to ask before I get started, how many of you do subscribe to Successful Farming? Could you just raise your hand? Oh, that's great. How many take Farm Wife News or have? Wonderful. I always like to ask those questions because I think that after you work for a magazine for a certain period of time, you begin to feel that you know the readers through the letters that you write or through the story interviews that you do and through speaking engagements. And I know I've had people tell me, too, that they feel as if they know me after reading articles or seeing the picture in the magazine, this type of thing. So it's always good to know that there are a good number of old friends out in the audience today, as well as some new friends, too, I hope. I write a monthly column for women in successful farming. I also do a farm life feature every month. And in addition, I am a farm management editor and work primarily with estate planning stories. If you've looked closely at Successful Farming in the last year or so, I think you may have noticed there have been some changes in the format as well as the content of the magazine. And I hope that you think these changes are improvements, and we do welcome your suggestions for the magazine. I've done a lot of traveling since I first joined the farm magazine field. I've gone from Oregon to Maine, and from Alabama to Wyoming and California. I've also had the opportunity to visit farms in Alaska, Hawaii, and Europe on SF tours. Wherever I go, I'm able to see and learn about different types of agriculture, from hop fields in Oregon to cotton in Alabama, rapeseed in Canada, and strawberries in Michigan. Yet I found that no matter where I go and how different the types of agriculture are, or how varied the lifestyles may be, I found that farm and ranch people everywhere have a lot of things in common. You have to admit some days that farm and ranch life can be quite unique. Things will happen on a farm that you just can't imagine happening anyplace else. And sometimes these happenings are humorous, or at least after they've passed and you can look back, sometimes you can manage a chuckle or two. I'd like to share an article with you this morning that was written by a farm woman about some of these experiences on the farm. It's called, You Know You're Married to a Farmer When. And in case some of you aren't quite sure, this should refresh your memory. You know you're married to a farmer when he comes into the kitchen while you're browning the roast to ask if dinner can be ready in a half hour. And then, after he's asked for dinner in a half hour, he suddenly takes off in the pickup to go to town to look at machinery. You know you're married to a farmer when he finally orders wall-to-wall carpeting and you find out that it's for the cows. You know you're married to a farmer when you find yourself stuffing your washing machine with clothes that you'd hesitate to let the dog sleep on, and then hours later search high and low for the source of that lingering silage perfume. You know you're married to a farmer when you ask for kindling for the fireplace, and he goes out to the shop, works furiously for 2 hours, and comes back in grinning with a nice little hatchet that he's made just for you to use. You know you're married to a farmer when you can't find the hot water bottle because it's keeping the newborn Chester White runt pig from an early grave. Or when you wave goodbye to friends and neighbors who are off on their 3-day 4th of July weekend as you hang Old Glory out on the porch with no plans to go anywhere. You know you're married to a farmer when your husband, chin on chest, snores blissfully through Saturday night at the movies. Or when your 2-year-old son or grandson sits on Santa Claus's lap and requests a nerve spreader for Christmas. You know you're married to a farmer when you can't put butter in the refrigerator's butter compartment because it's chock full of cans of snuff. Or when your anniversary, birthday, or Mother's Day rolls around and he's just been so busy lately that he hasn't had time to get a gift. Most shops aren't open before 6 a.m. or after 9 p.m. You know you're married to a farmer when you tell him that you're pregnant and he quickly starts to figure whether your due date is before or after combining is finished. You know you're married to a farmer when someone from town tells you how lucky you are to have your own meat after you've spent the entire morning chasing the cows out of the cornfield. Or when he expects you to handle the new self-propelled chopper, but worries when you get into car to drive to town. You know you're married to a farmer when he decides to clean the barnyard the afternoon that you're entertaining your church group. But I think you especially know that you're married to a farmer when he wouldn't trade places with anyone, and is always a little bit surprised to find out that you really wouldn't want to trade either. Next, I have just a little quiz today that was designed for farm women. I know you all have some paper there and probably a pencil or pen. It's real short, and it's a multiple choice quiz, so it won't take much room. And it's not too hard, so we'll start out with something easy this morning if you're not quite awake. The first question. You're driving a full load of bales out to feed the cattle. Your husband is perched on top of the load. He hammers on the cab roof. You don't know what he wants, so you slam on the brakes. 14 bales and your husband soar into the air. Do you, A, turn up the radio so you can't hear him? B, ask, is this where you wanted to unload? Or C, cry? Those are your three choices. What would you do? Okay, next question. He stops by the house to pick up his lunch and asks if you'll shut off the jet pump in an hour. Sure, you agree. Then you lay out the pattern for a new dress. Later that afternoon, you step out the back door into 6 inches of water. You, A, grab the hoe and start ditching. B, do all the chores so no one will have to use the back door that evening. Or C, say you soak the yard and you want to plant grass. Those are your choices. Next question. In spite of hints, he forgot your birthday. You, A, burn his egg. B, buy a nice dress and hand him the bill. Or C, wait, he'll think of it eventually. And when he does, he's really going to feel bad. Next question. You're rushed getting home and you turn too fast into the driveway. There are deep tracks where you came back out of the ditch. Do you A, hope he won't notice? B, tell him you swerved to avoid hitting a cat? Or C, get out the rake and smooth over the tracks? What would you do? Okay, we're coming to the last question now. He says, I love you. Now, do you say, A, doesn't everybody? Or B, then how come you? Or C, I love you. Now, what would you do on that last question there? Okay, if you've got your answer for that last one, well, if you picked C on the last question, the other answers on this quiz really don't matter all that much. But you still might want to keep this list handy for future reference, because a farm wife is bound to need a lot of answers. Hope y'all did real well on that quiz today. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about the roles that farm women play. And we all know that you wear a great number of hats. And a farm woman from Illinois decided to write a little poem about this to express her feelings about the many, many jobs which farm women are capable of doing and which they handle on the farm, and sometimes maybe a lack of awareness in the community about the roles that you do play. It's called Just a Housewife. Hello, Mrs. Jones. I've just called to say, I'm sorry I cried when you phoned today. No, I didn't get angry when your call came at 4, just as 8 Cub Scouts burst through the door. It's just that I'd had such a really full day. I'd baked pies for the PTA. The washing, the ironing, and scrubbing the floor were chores I had finished not too long before. I'd sewn up a dress, my daughter needs it this Sunday, and prepared for a meeting with 4-H'ers on Monday. No, the reason I cried and gave that great yelp was not 'cause you phoned just to ask for my help. The comment that threw me, nearly drove me berserk, was when you said, I'm sure you'll have time 'cause you don't work. Today, I think we hear a lot of talk about women qualifying to hold jobs in fields which were formerly considered the male domain. But I think there's one field which has always been open to women, the field of farming. Farm women have worked on the farm throughout the history of our nation, but historians often ignored their contributions, probably because churning butter, raising a garden, bearing children, plowing a field, and washing work clothes didn't seem like great accomplishments to them. However, there are many ways in which women contributed to agriculture throughout history. For instance, during colonial days, women assumed responsibility for the production of silk. Mrs. Thomas Foreman of Rose Hill, Maryland, wrote of baking cocoons in her oven after she took out the bread. And in the late 1800s, the Women's Silk Culture Association was formed in Philadelphia. And it was a woman, Eliza Lucas Pinckney, who is given credit for initiating the indigo industry in South Carolina in 1739. She experimented with the processing of indigo, raised seed, and distributed among a number of planters. An 1862 report from the newly formed USDA noted that on 3 out of 4 farms, quote, the wife works harder, endures more than any other on the place, end of quote. During the Civil War, women, without their men at home, worked on the farm to literally feed both armies. After the Civil War, a number of farm organizations were formed in which women played an active role. For instance, Caroline Hall was one of the co-founders of the National Grange in 1867. Another woman who was an early leader in the political arena of agriculture was Mary Elizabeth Lease, a mother of 4 who became associated with the Farmers Alliance movement in the state of Kansas. She was admitted to the Bar Association in 1885, and she became such a gifted speaker that she was nicknamed Patrick Henry in petticoats. During one of her frequent speeches for agriculture, Mary Elizabeth uttered a quotation which I'm sure you've all heard before, but you may not have been aware who said it first. She declared, "What you farmers need to do is to raise less corn and more hell." Yes, it was a woman who first spoke these words. In more recent years, Louise Stanley became the first woman to head a major agency in the Department of Agriculture. One of her first actions as chief of the new bureau was to call a meeting of national women's organizations to discuss plans, policies, and research in agriculture. Well, since that time, of course, many farm women's groups have come into existence. The major changes in American agriculture since the post-war years have affected the farm home and the lives of farm women tremendously. With few exceptions, the lives of farm women have changed as much in the past decade as farming itself. Much of this change can be attributed to the rise of modern appliances. Today, many farm homes are equipped with many of the comforts and conveniences of suburban living. For a farm woman's efficiency in her home means efficiency in 2 businesses, homemaking and farming. Modernizing a kitchen or buying a dishwasher or a microwave oven gives you more time to be outside with your husband or working on the farm books or promoting your product. For although women still work hard on the farm, driving tractors during planting and harvesting, preserving and freezing food, gardening and baking, modern conveniences have given you more time than your mother or your grandmother to take an active role in farm cooperatives, farm organizations, and agricultural legislative reform. In the past, I think a woman's value was measured mainly in terms of her usefulness as a homemaker, wife, and mother. Today, the young bachelor farmer no longer simply looks for a gal who can milk cows or keep house. If he's smart, he scouts for a woman who can handle a pickup and a pencil with equal ease. For success on a modern farm today depends almost entirely upon management. Farm women today are not only wives, mothers, and homemakers, they're business partners and promoters of agriculture. Today's farm wife must live with a high ceiling of debt, manage complex bookkeeping and tax records, raise children in a world of rapidly shifting values, take part in community, church, and school activities, understand the farm business problems, provide an emotional support system for her husband and children, and hold a family and a business together. Farm wives buy equipment, parts, twine, and feed. They run the house and the kids. They put on the screen windows, cook the meals, and lose sleep caring for newborn pigs. A 1978 survey by Successful Farming provides proof of this participation. They found that 51.6% of the women helped with or were in charge of the bookkeeping and records of the farm, 48.4% with the purchasing decisions, 44.2% with livestock, 41.3% field work, 40% with selling decisions, 20.6% with planting, and 9% other jobs on the farm. Farming has always been a risky business, and modern agriculture has added even more uncertainties and responsibilities. For instance, some of you may remember the panicky feeling you experienced when you and your husband bought your first major purchase for the business. Let's say it was a harvest store and you paid $10,000. Well, today $10,000 probably doesn't seem like much debt at all to you. You're probably living with a much higher debt ceiling. The number of farm women enrolling in stress seminars today is another indication of the increasing pressures of modern agriculture. In farming, like any other business, you question whether the things you set out to do, such as expansion, are good ideas, and whether there will be a market for your products. You worry about getting boxcars or trucks to transport your crop after it's harvested. In response to a successful farming panel survey last year, 82% said that there's more personal stress in farming today than there was 5 years ago. In addition, farm experts point to the strain of holding both a family and a business together. A woman can be caught in the middle of a father-son partnership on the farm, which might require a psychiatrist to handle. And yet, research at Cornell University has shown that when it comes to the transfer of the family farm from one generation to the next, the farm wife may play the most vital role in its success or failure. My first article for Successful Farming in 1979 highlighted the ways in which a farm woman exerts her influence in this delicate transition. A recent Farm Magazine survey indicates that 70% of farm women are consulted when a major farm purchase is made. 40% state that they have a say in brand selection of a product. Recently, I've noticed that even major advertising agencies with clients in the farm field are taking note of the expanded role of farm women in the business side of farming. For instance, Marsteller Inc. Agri-Marketing Group recently completed a survey concerning the decision-making capacity of women on the farm. In the past, many farm ads have shown the farm wife as the little woman behind the scenes in the home, washing dishes, taking refreshments to the field, etc. And you still see that type of ad today on TV. Well, now these ads aren't incorrect. Women do these things. But women are also responsible for a much broader range of business roles than these ads seem to indicate. Donna Paulina of Marsteller says, today farm women make two major types of decisions, family and capital decisions. The capital decisions involved major equipment purchases, decisions concerning building, crops, land purchases, anything involving a long-term financial commitment. She points out a third area, the area of operational decisions, is where we anticipate a change to come in the future. It's the area of decision-making that will have the greatest impact on us as agri-marketers because it's the area where women haven't been in evidence before. We anticipate more women becoming involved in brand selection of farm inputs, in the dealer selection of farm inputs, and in the day-to-day procedural decisions necessary to run a farm. Her associate, Steve Gerio, agrees. He adds, we probably should address women as valued clients rather than as accessories who have limited roles in purchase and decision-making on the farm. So I think it may take a while, but if you look, you might be able to see some changes taking place in the farm woman's image in advertising. In the past, women have been content to leave marketing to the male domain, and few men have disputed this division of labor on the farm. But modern farming is forcing a reevaluation of this traditional approach. A growing number of farm women are crossing the last threshold for farm women in the business operation, marketing. John Sharp, Ohio State University Extension economist, says, we believe that current trends will result in farms so large that farmers will need to employ someone to do their marketing. Why send women off farm to work, he asked, when they can provide that marketing assistance at home? Sharp introduced the first women-only college-caliber marketing course in the country almost 2 years ago. He has been teaching marketing to farmers for several years, but he told me few women had participated. Or if they did come to the class, he said they came with their husbands and they wouldn't turn in the worksheets and they were afraid to ask questions. Then a few women asked him if he could arrange a women-only class. The class was advertised, and 50 women from 11 counties registered for the 9 3-hour sessions. Some drove more than 75 miles each way to attend. Sharp told me farm women are the most intense students I've ever taught. Selling grain requires a lot of detail, and unfortunately many farmers won't take the time for it. Women seem more dedicated. He said women are realistic when it comes to economics, and they're less influenced by past history of the market. I talked to one of the women who took the women-only class. She told me, I took the class to get rid of those scraps of paper. My husband's, yeah, right, you recognize it. My husband's way of recording the markets was to use the edge of an old newspaper, and I generally pitched it into the wastebasket without ever knowing. Another farm woman agreed. She said, prior to the marketing class, my husband's system was to keep market records in the pocket of his shirt lying on top of the washing machine. So if you think that you would like to become more involved in marketing and participate more in that on the farm, there are just a few suggestions I have this morning of ways to get started. And maybe some of you already are actively pursuing these, but I'll just give you a little checklist just to make sure. First of all, attend as many seminars as you possibly can about marketing. Many extension groups, agribusinesses, PCA, Federal Land Bank are offering marketing seminars, and a lot of these are directing their attention toward women-only classes. Secondly, invest in a good notebook and graph paper and set up a record system. Read the Wall Street Journal daily. Organize graphs and basis charts. Keep a record of crop inventory. What do you have on hand? What have you sold? What is left to sell? Visit the Chicago Board of Trade if you ever get a chance. See what goes on over there, the other end of it. Update yourself on world events. Today, international decisions and weather conditions in other parts of the country have a large bearing on the prices that you'll get for your products. So update yourself on what's happening in the world that might affect your product. And last, subscribe to a marketing newsletter. And maybe you want to subscribe to 2 or 3 of them. And maybe you already do. But if you do you compare them and try to kind of gauge and weigh the different perhaps biases you may have noticed from the different newsletters and come out with a decision based on all of the information you have available to you. So those are just a few ways. I think today you will find a growing number of marketing seminars offered by Agribusiness and Extension for women. And if you don't know of any course in your area, bring up the idea of offering one to someone who you feel is in a position in your community to do something about it. Ohio Extension agent Don Moore says that women in the marketing class in Ohio estimated that understanding basis would increase marketing profits by 20 cents per bushel for corn and 50 cents per bushel for soybeans. A farmer who had earlier completed the same course agreed that this figure is in the ballpark, and that's $8,000 additional profits per farm. So marketing may be an area where you can make a difference. It's obvious that farmers need to spend the same amount of time caring for bulls and bears in the market as they do cows and pigs. Perhaps it's only natural that the initiative farm women have displayed in the farm business operation should spill over into the political and legislative arenas of agriculture as well. Even though the important roles of farm women are beginning to be recognized by many sectors, the IRS and other government departments have remained holdouts. As you know, the Department of Labor lists farm women under the category of unpaid labor. It's not surprising that farm women have very effectively adopted the cause of estate tax reform the past several years. In 1976, I went to Washington, D.C. with Doris Royal, the Nebraska farm woman who led the fight for estate tax reform. Since that time, many reforms have been brought about as a result of the determined lobbying efforts of farm groups. I'm sure you know that many estate tax revisions were included in the tax package which the President signed last August. The annual gift tax exclusion will be raised to $10,000 from $3,000. This means that a husband and wife jointly may give away $20,000 worth of property without gift tax. The estate exemption has been increased to $600,000 from $175,625. This means that if your estate is worth less than $600,000, you shouldn't have to pay estate tax at the first death. Rigid special use valuation rules, which kept many deserving farm families from qualifying, were made less stringent, and this will make many tests easier to meet and allow other arrangements such as crop share to be used in the special use formula. The special use ceiling was raised to $750,000 from $500,000, and this means that it may be possible to reduce this amount from the value of your estate. But perhaps the most important change in the law involves you, farm women who work with your husbands every day on the farm. As I mentioned earlier, the IRS never has recognized your labor as contribution to the worth of the farm business. And if you owned your land in joint tenancy and your husband died before you did, you probably would have had to pay estate tax on the entire farm. The IRS didn't consider that you owned half of it, unless you can prove it in money's worth. The new tax bill, however, increases the marital deduction to 100% of the property passing by gift during life or at death to a spouse. It results in a tax-free transfer between spouses. No more widow's tax. This change will help you tremendously to balance your property ownership, even if the wife does not work outside the home. Prior to the new law, husbands often had to pay gift tax to shift property into the wife's name. But the new marital deduction and the changes in joint tenancy law will enable husbands and wives to get out of the joint tenancy ownership, probably without a gift tax liability. And this will be a relief to many farm folks who have been struggling with how to escape this situation. Back in 1976, Doris Royal said to me, "There were many times, of course, when I became discouraged. There was much work to do on the farm. Many things were left undone because I was too busy fighting my estate tax battle. I had no organization or government agency funding me. But when I felt I wasn't capable to handle the job which I had created for myself, I would receive letters which told of the hardship that this law had created." She said, "About the time I would feel as if I had spent all the money I could, someone would send a book of stamps. We can shift our energies to other and more worthwhile and vital issues which are also important." Now that these estate tax reforms have been adopted, however, it doesn't mean that you can forget about the necessity of planning your estate. And as women, many farm consultants and attorneys say that you once again play a vital role in seeing to it that your estate is well planned. Some say this stems from the fact that women are more easily accept the fact of their own death and that they're practical enough to do something about it. That may be. But when you look at it carefully, who's going to bear the suffering or gain the benefits of a well-balanced estate? Most likely it's the woman, for in many cases the husband dies first. So it's in your own self-interest and the interests of your children that you recognize the importance of estate planning. No estate taxes to the surviving spouse on jointly held property, no estate taxes on the first $600,000 of estate assets, and improved special use valuation benefits mean that the wife's estate will be fully taxed when she dies. The problem of estate taxes hasn't been fully solved. It's been postponed in many cases until the wife's death. And your children who inherit the property do not have a special deduction similar to the marital deduction to reduce the taxable estate. You'll still have settlement and administration costs to pay, and you still have to decide how to transfer it and how to treat your children equitably. So continue to plan your estate despite the changes in the tax bill. It's not a panacea to farm families. It will help, though. Attend all of the estate planning meetings you can. Consult with a team of experts, including an attorney, banker, accountant, and insurance agent. Insist that you and your husband sit down and list your estate planning goals. Organize your insurance policies, titles of ownership, and estimate the value of your assets. Reassess your life insurance. As a result of the new tax law, women may have a greater need to buy life insurance for estate liquidity. And find out if you could get a joint policy payable upon the death of the second spouse. Well, there are many crucial issues facing agriculture today. Highways, parks, and airports are gobbling up more than 2 million acres a year. The USDA estimates that new airport construction takes 35,000 acres of mainly flat, productive land in rural areas. Airports now cover about 2 million acres. In the past 10 years, we've poured concrete over 30 million acres of farmland. And that's more cropland than presently exists in the state of Iowa, land that never again can grow food for our hungry world. Yet bills to establish comprehensive programs to help preserve prime farmland have often been defeated both on the state and the national level. And a major source of opposition to the measures have been the contention that the bill is the first step toward federal land use planning. Well, no one wants federal land use controls, but it is up to farm people to think of other solutions then to the problem. Weather conditions in some parts of the country have helped trigger a surge in soil erosion. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen the black earth on top of the white snow that we've had for the last month or 6 weeks. At the present erosion rates in this country, it's predicted that 40 million more acres of cropland will be lost by the year 2000. Farmland losses so far have been hidden by sensational gains in productivity per acre from fertilizers, herbicides, and other technology. Further yield gains, however, will become harder to achieve and less impressive in the years to come. No one wants mandated soil conservation programs, but what are we proposing as a positive solution to this problem? We're not only losing prime farmland, but we're losing farms in this country. Since 1974, people have left the farm at a rate of 5.8%, and experts predict that we'll lose anywhere from 200,000 to 400,000 farms during the next 20 years if present trends continue. I'm sure you're concerned about preserving the family farm, but at the same time, you don't believe that a family farm can be defined by the number of acres or the dollar amount. You know that the minimum size of a successful operation has to be determined by soil, climate, crops, and water supply. But there are people in this country who do not know these things. And this brings up a concern that I have about the trend for the USDA and other federal agencies to ask for advice and give an ear to those who know little or nothing about agriculture. Well, it's gratifying to see that agriculture has finally received some long overdue recognition for its importance. But it does seem that as though a great number of individuals and groups are making far-reaching decisions and recommendations affecting agriculture without a genuine concern or understanding for farming. As you may know, some of these groups have been obtaining federal funds to use in their programs. I recently wrote an article that was in the August issue of Successful Farming about the influence of non-farm groups in farm issues. It's a trend which I think farm organizations have to recognize and to adopt some combat strategies. No doubt you've also been following the nutrition guidelines which the government have issued. Now this has died down a little bit, but those guidelines still do exist and are available if people write for them. And I think government's role in nutrition information is a very questionable issue. But there are several non-farm groups which work daily to promote their views about nutrition to the USDA. And if you produce livestock, I don't have to tell you that their goals aren't compatible with the future of your livelihood. The decline in red meat consumption and the corresponding rise in poultry and fish is evidence that we in agriculture must adopt some innovative strategies and responses to changes in eating habits. This may include changes in meat grades or promotion efforts similar to those which have been launched by the citrus industry and others. Animal rights is another issue, of course. I understand that a bill will be introduced in the House in a House committee by an Ohio legislature in the next few weeks. And Congressman Harkin does chair this committee, so you may want to be in touch with him about your feelings about legislation which would set up a committee which would make recommendations concerning animal rights. People today are moving from the city to the country to enjoy the benefits of country life. Many of these new rural residents will live beyond the town's tax base and continue to take much of their business to the metro areas. And yet they'll expect added services from their local communities, such as water plants, sewers, parks, and hospitals. They're also likely to complain about the noise and the dust from farm machinery or the odors from livestock. And they probably dislike the commercial fertilizer you use and don't appreciate the smell of liquid manure either. Well, this is another issue which I'm sure that you and your farm organizations would like to respond to with a common sense approach which will promote good relationships between rural and urban. The problem of young farmers getting started in agriculture today is a major concern. Some states, such as Minnesota and Texas, have introduced programs to assist farmers who otherwise would be unable to obtain credit to purchase farm real estate. Some of these methods include guaranteed loans and deferred interest payments. Tax incentives to encourage retiring farmers to sell their land to young farmers and ranchers have been adopted in Minnesota and North Dakota. Obviously, I think there's much that can be said and done for agriculture, ranging from soil conservation to education of the urban consumer. In fact, looking at all the pressing issues there are before us today, I think it's tempting to be overwhelmed. But I don't think any of you would be in farming yet today if you gave up easily when you were confronted with problems. Let's face it, farmers are members of a minority group today, and there's much that they need to do to better their position. But the problem is that most farm people don't get around to speaking up about agriculture, or at least in front of non-farm groups. The importance of people in agriculture communicating their own message cannot be overemphasized. Time and again, it's been proven that farm folks are their own best spokespeople. As farm women, you have the opportunity to become involved in organizations that are working for agriculture and your way of life. There's no one way to speak up for agriculture. Each one of you is an individual with individual talents and abilities, as well as personal responsibilities which affect your participation within your farm group. Each of you, however, can contribute in your own way on small projects as well as by joining with others to work on large-scale issues. A farm wife from Texas writes, "Too many of us have adopted the attitude that we can do nothing. I have come to the opinion that the most pressing job I have to do on any day is to be present at a meeting or a function of an organization whose purpose it is to promote my business or my welfare." She says the pickles can wait or go to blazes. The expression, "I'm just a farm wife," has no place today in the farm woman's vocabulary. According to Dr. Joida C. Hansen of the University of Minnesota, the time has come for women in farming to reevaluate their self-image. Their interests are professional, and their self-image deserves to be too. For years, American agriculture rested at the back of everyone's consciousness while our population moved to the cities. We looked to the urban areas to solve the problems of the world. Today, I think things have changed. We can see that American agriculture, which such a short time ago seemed so static and non-changing, today stands out as a leader in the supply of food. We see that it strengthens our dollar and keeps the imported materials and products we need flowing into our country. We're all here today because we are involved in agriculture. And because we're involved in agriculture, we're part of an industry which is overflowing with issues, with controversy, with potential and excitement. I, for one, am proud to be part of this ongoing, growing business of farming.